has worked with brands like Adobe, Spotify, and Samsung. And yeah, I also read you led a team that developed the world's most affordable solar-powered light.
Oh, I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Back then, there was a time when I was the client of IDEO and I like having them run around. Oh, it's such a small room.
Yeah, I know. You're doing this for the people on the call. Yeah.
Yes, yes, I did. So I did this as the VP of Global Design for D-Light, which is still around. It's one of the two companies that came out of the like D school that actually became a legit business, successful business, and is a for-profit social impact enterprise. And the two founders founded that because they were in a Peace Corps and saw how many people in Africa, which is like burn themselves and their kids and their houses by using, well, a lot of very dangerous substances just to create light. And they thought like, we can fix this. And they did. And I was lucky enough to be brought in by their new CEO to overhaul the entire physical product line at the time, including getting like making a product or assembling a team to create a product that reaches this $5 selling point so that they could do this, embed this into microfinancing and all the ecosystems around that. God, I don't want to do a lecture on this, but yes, I did that. And the funny thing is, I'm not an industrial designer, nor have I had any manufacturing experience. But it's one of these stories where you get this offer, and the CEO sits down with you, and after 2 hours on a dinner, I say like, I've never done this. And the CEO says, but you know how to like find the right people to do.
I think that's nice what you just said. Never done this, but I think that's what we're all facing right now.
That's what we're all facing right now.
Never done
Exactly.
this. Let me quickly introduce all the other ones in this nice round.
Sorry.
Don't worry. Grant Swonk, he brings expertise in HCI, human-computer interaction, and cognitive science. His day-to-day is researching emerging technologies from AR to VR to brain-computer interfaces. Then we have Leslie Gordon, 9 years close to 10 with Microsoft, serves as a senior program manager here in Silicon Valley, where she leads strategic initiatives to enhance customer management and driving business impact. I know you have also a strong focus in mentoring and connecting people.
Yeah. I do a lot of mentoring early in career folks. Probably because everybody goes, oh, you look so young. It's like, no, not young. There's gray hairs in there. So it's interesting to see through the generations how we learn, and it's changing.
Yeah, excited to hear later what you can tell us about it. Stef, educator at UC Berkeley. Stef leads research on emerging products, teaches designing future systems. I think this is very fitting also for today's topic. Your experience spans Meta Reality Labs, Adobe. You have led numerous 0 to 1 product launches in spatial computing and also background in cognitive science. Vincent, welcome, Vincent Duro. He brings an extensive experience in scaling consumer and enterprise products, having grown multiple products to over 100 million daily users while navigating complex regulatory environments. Deep knowledge in expertise in applied machine learning, natural language processing, robotics, and currently Vincent is advising multiple companies in that field. And then we have Sebastiano Tofaletti, welcome, from Brussels, I understand. Hopefully I'm not butchering all the titles. You lead Europe's largest network of digital SMEs, small, medium enterprises, as the Secretary General of the European Digital SME Alliance, representing 45,000 companies across the 28 countries in Europe. And so we have a lot more people here in the room, actually.
Do you have a where is the red carpet?
You also have been recently elected vice chair of the European Cybersecurity Organization, and you focus on software, cybersecurity, AI, blockchain standards. We opened with buzzwords. We're closing here the intro. Thanks for being here, guys. And a quick note to everybody here in the audience, if this works. It doesn't. Can you move that? Yeah, thank you. One click. So, if you want to be participating in our discussion, there is a QR code that you can scan in the top right corner. So whenever, while we're talking, a question arises, feel free to just drop that question into there and we can incorporate it. I think you don't hear me perfectly. If you want to connect with any of the panelists, you can also just scan that second QR code and you will have all the LinkedIn contact. So, all right, guys. I've invited you here out of this pure reason of there's so much talk all the time about AI taking jobs. You should work with AI. Have you incorporated AI yet? And all of you work at the intersection of humans, technology from different angles, research, industry, policy, education, design. The thing is, we're all experiencing this pace, unprecedented, change in technology, but that also changes our day-to-day interactions with each other, with that said technology. Could each of you share a specific moment or example from the past few months that made you fundamentally rethink your assumption about what's possible? Or
Yeah. Thank you.
We asked ChatGPT.
Or we asked ChatGPT, that is the third question. I deliberately took AI out of this conversation today. I wanted to think maybe there's a room here, but that would have been the 7th panelist. So I think we're enough, also including the audience. The other question, apart from, is there a moment that fundamentally reshaped maybe what you're thinking about the day-to-day, what technology is possible or not? Is there a critical opportunity or challenge in your line of work that isn't getting enough attention, where you think we should look a bit deeper beyond the buzzword?
I think I can answer the first one for me. So one thing that's interesting you did not mention about me, I'm a recovering Googler. So I spent 17 years at Google. And so I started, I did innovation before that I had a startup. So I've done innovation in small teams, small organizations, and then at Google I did innovation in big organizations. So maybe you guys know Chromecast, okay. So I started that at Google. So one turning point for me is the last 7 years I spent working on Google Assistant, which is the competitor to Siri. And for the longest time, for the first 6 years, we made a promise to people that they could actually use voice to get things done in their house and play music and all these sort of things. And the way I used to describe the program is, with the technology that we had, it was like we're gonna build a brain one neuron at a time. And every time we add a new neuron to the brain, we need to retest the brain because maybe we messed it up. And it just didn't scale. And it was, clear that this was a dead end. So the first thing that really struck me was, how can we be 2,500 people working for 6 years on there's such momentum that we just couldn't stop the disaster. And then to answer specifically your question, and then the LLM miracle happened, and all of a sudden the things that we had tried to do for 6 years, became possible, and actually going beyond, beyond
What you
even
could imagine.
what our short goals were. What's that?
You mean beyond what your short-term goals were, and then you went above
I
it?
mean, it felt like, I mean, we had yes, essentially all of a sudden, we found that we had I'm stating the obvious, we had a piece of technology now that would allow us to meet the promise that we'd made to consumers 6 years prior. And it was I would say it was very jarring.
Thank you. How do you guys relate to this? Is there something that on your day-to-day?
Something that maybe is a nice build off of that. I don't know, show of hands, how many folks have used Notebook LM by Google? Yes. Okay, a couple folks. So for folks who haven't used it, so you can upload documents, get a summary or a study guide, but there's also this voice overlay feature. I hope I'm not butchering it. I've only used it like every day since it came out. But basically you can upload these documents and get a podcast, a 2-person dialogue. And this was something that really impressed me, though I've been using Gen AI tools since pretty early on, like your ChatGPT and Cloud for day-to-day activities. Notebook struck me as a really relatable medium, like getting a podcast that is synthesizing. You'll have like a really complex 90-page research document, and you'll get a digestible 9-minute dialogue that you can now get the key points of this information. And it was really striking for me how engaging it was, how helpful it was, and helped me. It's not going to replace, like I wouldn't use it if I'm a student studying for a test and I want to get a really high mark. I still won't fully trust it, but there is something about the dialogue. I feel like the threshold for absolute accuracy is lowered, and instead it's more about getting the salient points and the fact that I can just consume information in a new manner. And I think it also demonstrates the value proposition for folks who maybe weren't sold on what is this ChatGPT, the idea that, I can just listen to a podcast. Like that's a very accessible and clear value add of the technology. So that's been something that's been really been really fun. Like little use cases, like upload your resume if you want like a boost, like the cool things those two podcast hosts will say about your resume. I recommend that to my students, kind of frame and reframe something that you might just take as granted. So that's my maybe hopeful, positive Gen AI hands-on experience.
And Leslie, you were saying, I mean, I know you're big on the mentoring side, right? Is there anything that you have observed that changed a lot in the last 3 years? Something where you're hopeful, something where you feel like...
Yes, I think COVID changed everything. When we all had to go home, we couldn't talk face to face with anybody but our family. I have 2 tweens, I guess you could say, and to watch us all go to 4 different corners of the house with whatever device we were using and work, school, connections, it fundamentally shifted what I thought about technology, because it was Monday through Friday, no devices, focus on school, focus on that personal interaction with people. Learn about it, but we want you to think. We don't want you just to consume whatever's coming at you. And for me, I had to change my fundamental way of thinking, because that was the only way my children and I could actually have social interaction with anybody outside of our family or work. And then it got me thinking how, and not just the how we do it, but also what are we consuming? What's being pushed to us as human beings?
Yeah, so let's see here, where to begin? So part of my job is to get boots on the ground, to really understand what people need, what their pains are, etc. And we were doing some work for a client, works in AR and VR, and it was at the intersection of kind of creative tools, Gen AI, and then young people's relationships to AR and VR. So this entailed me going across 4 different states, running 2-hour sessions, almost kind of ethnographic sessions in people's homes to understand young people's relationship to AR and VR. There were participatory design sessions and whatnot. Some of it was just observational. But what really got to me was just how interesting it is that kind of in this new age of a glut of information and technology, young people's psychologies are a little bit different, and they're growing up in a world where they have an incredibly flexible medium. AR, for example, in VR, where instead of being given pretty static creative tools, like pens and papers, well, they have this whole world that they can use Gen AI to kind of create new things, scaffold their environments to get all these interesting kind of payoffs in terms of like what they can memorize, what they can learn, and how to assimilate that information. And I got to see this, kind of in real time, person to person, and how this kind of affects their relationship to what it means to be creative, what it means to engage with other people. Of course, it cuts all ways because part of the sample that we interviewed spanned across socioeconomic status. So, whereas on the one hand, young folks might use technology as augmentative and pro-social. On the other hand, it kind of unlocks or sometimes bad behavior too. So it cuts all ways, but it's really interesting to see the possibility that's unlocked when you give people incredibly creative mediums like AR. Yeah.
Alex, you were saying what still stays with me, this like doing things for the first time. I feel like, what do you think if we look back in a couple of years to this time right now? Is there something where you think we should have, or we should right now focus on something that we might not really see?
Hello?
Yeah.
I want to say, oh, yes. I think that we talked a little bit about, but
Need to put
the hype,
yeah.
the hype is in the way. So, how do I phrase this? So I have been living here in the Bay Area for 20 years. So I've seen a couple of hype cycles, like where there is like a new technology, emerging technology, like coming out. Everybody loves it. Everybody kind of like tries to do their variety of it. And of course, we understand why that happens, because this is the epicenter of like how you extract value from new things, new ideas, new technologies. And but the problem being, and I see this actually in working with my students, bear with me for a second, I'm not making the bridge yet, but technology changes so fast. And I mean, the prime example, the best example that we now have in a long time is basically ChatGPT, right? So it's like, hey, wait a second, last week it was this week is this, boom, now we are like, it's this, and it's only like 3 months later. And everything goes even further, right? It's even further blown up, and like all the political infighting, and everybody wants to in on the game, which is just that's just like the capitalist way of extracting and value in that way. But the problem is that humans, and this is why everything that I heard so far is like ties into this so wonderfully, is humans change too, but on a completely different clock speed, right? Like years. It could be 50 years, it could be 100 years for certain things, right? Like we are incredibly slow changing species. We have like a brain that's wired for like, ooh, right? Like everything juicy and cool and new and here and now. And we love that. And then we eat too much of it, and then our tummy hurts. And then we look at too much of it, and then our eyes and our brain hurts. And then we go to design school and we design mental health apps to like for ourselves. Yes, because we just want this now. But like we cannot have it now. So, and that's another topic, why we can have that all. But I think it is important that it's a mindset thing. It's totally a mindset thing to kind of, and I try to distill this in my students where it's possible. It says like, look, you need to be, one of the things that as a designer is, you have to work with first principles. Think of yourself like a monk. You need to keep like, you love this technology, you want to do your final project about AR because you love it so much. Are you really sure? Right? You cannot fall in love in the things that you are interested in. At any given time, you need to be able to throw the baby out with the water. That sounds horrible, especially with a German accent. But right. But the thing is that we can have always be able to look at things and starting from zero to see the things clearly. And the most dangerous thing is our hypes. And we are, I mean, even if you look at the hype cycle of AI, of the Gartner model right now, people, I mean, like most of the like startups focusing on all like the early stuff, even though like there are areas that are much later, right? Like application layer, which is not the fancy front end stuff of like, do I have a voice modality? Do I have a visual modality? Do I have this or do I have that? There are underlying layers that are so super unsexy if you're not interested in engineering and the systemic implications of these systems and how they work together. But that's where it's happening. And interestingly enough, these processes, designing these, they take time too. So this is another, if you would want, you could have like almost like a clock with these different clock speed layers and see how that relates to each other. And so a lot of the stuff that's the hype now will go away. And there are things, some of that, like that some of us here are able to imagine. Some of us have even already started working on. It's just not surfacing yet because it's not ready yet. But that's the thing. That's my answer to that. Like to not working with the reality of who we are making this for. Our customers are all humans, unless we are creating AIs for like agents that work with other agents, and then ultimately at the end, there's always a human. That's the customer, I sure also. And
Can I give a counter example?
Yes,
Just
counter
example to I think what you're saying, because in my small world, which is the world of software development, I do not know any self-respecting software engineer today who's not using AI to write code for them. And, you know, it just happened very, very quickly. I think in a matter of months, I see those software engineers adopting new tools that, I mean, new tools that fundamentally change the way they work on a monthly basis. And I see their productivity, you know, jumping dramatically. So I think that I hear all the things that you're saying about complexity and inertia and so on and so forth. But at the same time, and I'm giving this example, which is software engineers, which is what I know. But I mean, I have to imagine that, for instance, if I was a lawyer, I would watch very, very carefully what's happening right now with AI, because I think, so anyway, so all this to say, and you may be right that actually the world is moving faster than humans can keep up with, but the world is not going to wait for us.
I do love this metaphor that you brought up with the two overlaying clocks. And it also reminds me of where we are right now, because I feel like the Bay Area and Silicon Valley also is on a different clock.
You're right.
And it brings me back to Sebastiano, actually. How is your, outside view representing so many small businesses and hearing all of this and then coming always here? You like a world traveler in itself, a time traveler there.
It is super interesting to hear this conversation, because it makes me think, because you asked about this generative AI, you know, what is really that is important for us in this revolution. And from what I hear, there is this thing with hype. There is this thing with enormous opportunities, a lot of acceleration in technology, and so on. But on the other hand, there are two aspects of it. One is this, and then there is a dark aspect, which, you know, we can pretend it doesn't exist, but it is there. And you mentioned COVID, and a little bit since COVID, I think our life has slightly changed. Our let's say the way we consume technology has slightly changed. it has become, it was already before, but it has become even more of an addiction. Sorry if I use that word, but it is what it is. We all realize how much we cannot live without our phones, our screens, and then we have our children and so on. And then we have the aspect of, political influencing, misinformation, and democracy. And there is really a lot of, let's say, dark aspects, which I have to connect with technology. And then the question is that I ask myself, is technology good or bad? Because this makes me think, maybe this is bad. On the other hand, it is good because there is a lot of positive aspects in it. But my answer to that is that technology per se is neither good or bad, but technology can do a lot of good. It is a fantastic tool that can really change our lives and can improve the way our society works. What is really the issue at the core? Because, in Europe, because you asked about us, Europe, we have tried to regulate AI. We have this fantastic AI Act. I don't believe it is fantastic. I believe it is a nightmare for any company, any startup, etc. Don't ask me about it. I don't think it is the solution to regulate AI that way, really. But what is really the problem, which no one has looked at, is the real source of the issue, of the dark side of AI, is the market. And the fact that the market is hyper concentrated, with a lot of power in the same few companies, with a lot of push from Wall Street, from the investors behind to, an economic drive, which is, you have to generate more and more value out of it. And so that's why, a technology which could be just there to help people becomes addictive, because the more it becomes addictive, the more you use it and you make money and so on and so forth. And so that is, in my opinion, really the core issue, which no one or very few people are talking about, are looking at. Who is nowadays controlling AI? And do we want to do something about it? Do we want to live in a dystopian world or not? Because, technology could be a fantastic thing. If technology was democratic, there were 1 million companies doing AI, you have a lot of choice. Maybe it's going to be a little bit less user-friendly, let's face it. But you have 1 million choices in front of you, and the market is going to self-regulate. You don't need any law, because the good is going to come out. Instead, if we let the market hyper-concentrate as it is doing now, I am afraid we are going to end up in a dystopian world where we really have to be worried about.
I would love to hear your thoughts first, Grant, on this, because I know you're thinking about this.
I love what you're tracking on. And I think this goes all the way, not just from top-down kind of market dynamics, but also how we train and educate people who are working in technology. So I think one of these really wicked kind of ill virtuous cycles here is, well, some technology is sexy or part of this hype, and you have a lot of capital on the market, labor, going towards particular technologies being developed. All right, people want to work at XYZ company because they want to work on whatever they're developing, and without asking these bigger questions about, okay, what are we actually doing here? I like to optimize XYZ function, etc., but what is the end goal here? And I think this bubbles up from how we educate and train people in design and engineering. We focus very much so, and some people here might not like this, that I say this, but we focus too much on craft. I think craft is something that you should have a sufficient amount of, because we should all be good at something. But you also need to care about these bigger should questions too, the ethics behind it. And I think when you have people who have developed a point of view and thought critically about where you want to apply the craft, then what you get is a better distribution on kind of the labor markets, because then they can say, I'm not going to work at that company because they're doing this with that product, as opposed to just caring about optimizing said product. So I think it comes down to also education too.
And on that one, very much so, because critical thinking, one would think that critical thinking is taught at every school, but A, it's not, and B, not every student is receptive to it. Because once again, I'm like saying something that might be not easily be heard, because, well, the college I teach at, friends and colleagues from UC Berkeley, we are all like being paid from like the tuitions that international students pay. And international students come in, and some of the international students have a hard time. I see this especially at the undergraduate level, and it is sort of like an overlap of like where the US system and the cultural system, like the students come from, completely collide in a way that doesn't serve the students. And I kept it right there.
But are you saying that the US system is enhancing the critical thinking, or are you saying, like, can you be a bit more clearer on what you mean?
In theory, right? Like if you grew up in the US system, it's easier because it's different cultural context. And I've seen this multiple times, and it's something that I think the US schools just need to get so much better at. It's not just about like having non-English or like English learner students. It's there is so much more that I think would like kind of bust the frame of like our conversation. But it is one of the most critical ways. Like one of the things why am I doing this? Because like this hits a string with me, because I've been like, why does the school doesn't have physical education? Why doesn't the school have like an early program which is like something like, I would call it critical thinking and personal mastery, like where you become like a human being, no matter if you're a designer or not. A little bit like what we used to have in Europe, you know, like where you have like a general, the first year is very, very general, but you also learn skills just because you are a young person, how to like be in the world and know where to find water and some dry bread. And this is not taught anymore, and the kids are getting lost in this. And why am I saying this? We talk about the pandemic, and we are at the tail end of this. Luckily now, an entire like 2 generations of students that have not learned to interact with each other in like real time, like real life, that came to classes, they went back to their dorm room and didn't leave it for the rest of the day, just to go to another class. And then so like all this, like these social interactions, one of the most important things, making these social connections and also learning how to be with each other almost in an open space, right? Like where you can be who you are at the college. That wasn't there, and these kids are now out there, and they have a like very hard time like to and send in like hundreds of like resumes, and those resumes are scanned by AIs and then to be auto pushed on some piles.
But can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because you are in education.
Yeah, I am.
We come to Silicon Valley
Yeah.
to learn how to make money with technology. Because
That's what we all thought.
you guys are masters in it, right? We have no idea how to do it in Europe, really no idea. Or we have some idea, but not as good as here. So we have a lot to learn here.
Yeah.
That's one thing. But the other thing is, okay, this is something I'm sure you teach a lot in universities and so on, because you must do it. But is anyone also looking at trying to educate these students how to make good out of technology?
Oh,
is there a discussion about that?
Absolutely. Of course.
I think Leslie.
Yeah, I wanted to comment. I think it starts earlier than college. I think it starts when they're this big. And I say that because I am a product of the American school system, public school system, and have seen it change over the decades to where it's not democratized. So you've got charter schools on one end that are teaching those things, critical thinking skills, they're leaving it to parents to do the things outside of school, art, music. We used to have those things in the American school system, and some still do. It's just that you have to have the money to do it. And if you don't, then you don't have that exposure. So that's one of the things I try to do. I see Patrick in the audience here, bringing those underrepresented groups to Silicon Valley and saying, you know, in where I live at in Sacramento, we don't have access to Stanford professors, but that's a big thing here in Silicon Valley. Oh, my high school senior is doing their thesis, and I'm going, wow, up in, you know, a disparate school, we don't have that. And so that's one of the ethical implications, I think, of AI that I think about all the time, especially with early in career. For me, being a woman of color, I always try to represent the opposite voice. And are we thinking about the implications of this? You mentioned AR and VR. Bought my kids Meta, you know, one of the devices. I put it on for an hour and I said, man, this hurts my head. Who thought that this would be comfortable to wear and use? I'm taking it off and I'm going back to my screens because that's what's comfortable. I said, come and talk to me when it's in glasses, right? So I think you're going to see a wide variety in the American school system with people who know better in Silicon Valley. We're a little drunk on our own Kool-Aid, I think, and we're biased for sure. But that's why I try to keep the opposite and keep the human at the center of that and always bring it back. And that 13th man concept, everybody's go, 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 and you're going, wait, from that perspective.
I also,
But at the same time, to be honest, in the Silicon Valley, we're, especially if you look at high growth companies, small and big ones, we don't optimize for tech for good. We optimize for tech for money.
Right.
sure.
We have a small department for tech for good.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, yeah, let's be.
What I'm also
honest.
hearing, listening to you guys, is a bit, if we zoom out, yes, we talked a lot about education, and maybe it starts at this age, maybe it needs to go back to universities, maybe it needs to be more global, because one university maybe serves the critical thinking part more than others. But what I'm also hearing is, well, we all learn again to be together, it feels like. That's why we also have these kinds of events, right? We all have to relearn how is it to be sitting together, interacting with each other. I feel like this is exactly, these social norms have changed, plus the technology comes, plus these overlaying clocks of it's changing so much. Do I have to learn another social norm right now? I feel like I want to take this critical thinking out and talk about this a little bit. Is this then the future skill that we need to have, or is this just another buzzword? You need to think critically.
No,
What does that even mean?
Exactly. That's not a buzzword. It's almost like something that has always been there, and it's now so much more important to come back. Right? It's a little bit like sometimes I'm talking to my students and they look with blank eyes at me, like at the old Greek, like man, the Stoics, you know, it's like everything in moderation, you know, and all of this is like, what do you mean in moderation? I have everything at my fingertips. But so the thing is to understand if the younger generation understands that everything in moderation and with like enough time and perspective and the ability to think through things, right? Then we have won something because we know this because we are already old. We have seen it enough that we know, like, yeah, okay, yeah, I need to do some physical exercise. Yes, I do know, like, I need to like do some mindfulness. I need to like do some stress management. I need to be kind to my family and my friends, and not be an extractive asshole like all the people I'm working for. Like now and then, all these things we know because you ignore it for a while and then it then seeps in just
But
through
do you
experience.
guys believe that?
Yeah.
No, I have a question. So,
Oh, sorry.
so and you probably don't believe your answer is going to be no. But I don't. I think we need to ask ourselves that taking AI in small quantities is an option. I'm not sure it's an option.
I would think
It'd be like, it's just one thing. I think that to me, the metaphor would be, can we take fire as a, you know, fire in moderation, or electricity or books, or you know what I'm saying is, I think that it may be that we're in a situation where we have to embrace AI, not take it in moderation.
If you wanted to say it first.
Yeah, so I think a theme that we've been circling around is this idea of redefining craft for the people who are maybe more senior in their careers, like using AI, like even to your example, Vincent, about software engineers adopting this into their process. I think there's a footnote here that I see much less open-armed embrace from the design community. I think we're maybe on the more bullish AI, like let's work with it. But you know, in contrast, if I talk to someone at a conference who's a designer and they, you know, that they're talking about Adobe or Figma, AI is not a good advancement. So there's this element of redefining craft for the folks who are building maybe the AI technology itself, and that redefinition might look like orchestrating sort of bigger pictures, like sort of more orchestrating systems. And that's something we should put a pin in. But then I also think about our conversation about younger folks when I hear educators, you know, if we're talking about redefining craft, we can do that because we learned the basic sort of steps that leveled up to understanding the big picture. What does it look like if we're using these tools but didn't have those fundamental building blocks and you're jumping right into Gen AI tools and don't have that foundation? Like what, like thinking about the dearth of critical thinking, if that intersects with the lack of like the American education system, sort of what then, like the folks who have that scaffolding, we might be all right. We might be thinking in systems. We can talk about incentive structures and how we need to think about implications of emerging tech versus, you know, incentive structures to just make more money for the next quarter. But then talking about the tech for younger folks, I don't know what that really looks like. And this gets to how is this technology regulated in schools? How do educators adopt the tech, and what does critical thinking look like when we have these tools at our disposal? Throw out a lot of ideas there.
I want to hone in on the one about trust, where we've got an AI system that hallucinates, and I don't call it a hallucination. I call it a flat out lie. It'll make things up if it doesn't have something. And I always will ask both my children and everybody that comes early in career, do you take this as gospel? Do you trust this? Does it sound right? Those are the critical thinking skills when we talk about AI. And the school systems and the teachers are behind, right? Every group that comes, even from Europe, over, you know, they come in and they say, hey, I submit my paper and I use ChatGPT to write it. And there's things that are now being embedded in the code so that a teacher can know if you do it. And I say, but you're their teacher. You should know how they write already without these tools. And if you don't, then take it away and give them a pencil and a piece of paper and say, give me your ideas about that. And then you really know, and then that solves that problem. So I always talk about that with my children, any new students. Does that really make sense when you read these big numbers? Because we're in this information age where it's so overwhelming. Who do I trust? What do we do? That's a big thing at Microsoft. You know, where I work is trust. They drill it into our head. We want, you know, to make sure that our customers trust us, and we are the custodians of their data, but we can't see it, right? And it's a big thing for me is, well, I want to make sure we're building systems that you can trust. And what better way to do it? They call it dog fooding at mine. And I'm like, I don't eat dog food. So I'll say drinking my own wine, but I don't drink either. But it sounds more palatable when it's wine versus dog food. And I just want to make sure that we're doing those things that ask the ethical questions, but also challenge the user to use those critical thinking skills. And if not, why not? And where are we starting with that at?
Sebastiano.
I just wanted to follow up on what Vincent said, because you made an sort of equivalence between AI and things like electricity. And this is the point, because you said, okay, should we take electricity, AI as, you know, just limit the use, or as we will do with electricity? And I think really the equivalence is important, because the difference between AI and electricity, or gas, or water, or any essential facility, is that electricity is essentially a public good facility, a public facility. It is governed and provided by the state or by a private company, which is highly regulated, where really the state recognizes that that is a fundamental facility. Everyone has to have access to electricity, water, gas, and so on. And so the price is going to respect certain limits, and there are going to be a number of regulations around it. AI, which is becoming the same thing, an essential facility, is not under the same circumstances because it is governed by the private sector in ways which are completely, let me say, wild and completely driven by economic drivers, which, as I said, there is this issue of market concentration, which is not making things better. It's driving things in the opposite direction. So I think as a society, whether it's Europe or the US, we are at the point where we should ask ourselves the question, should we treat certain technologies, in particular AI, like public facilities? Or are we fine with the system where we are? Because the system which we are is going to drive us to the dystopian society. I have no doubt about it.
And
But wait,
Asking is, I think is, and which I think is what you're asking is, should we nationalize?
I don't want to be, I know, wait, because yes, I knew we were going there. I don't want to be seen as any communist or anything like that. I really, also because my job is to represent entrepreneurs and or very far from me, but the point, on the opposite, it's like with electricity. If you make something an essential facility, a public facility, then everyone will do business with it, and there's going to be a lot of competition, there's going to be a lot of growth, and a lot of economic activity. And the same thing in generative AI could be a public facility on top of which everyone can build their own business and can innovate and can they really go fast. But if it is owned by a few private companies, then it's going to be problematic. That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
It's controversial as it might be, but just throw it there as an idea.
I mean, I think absolutely, we should absolutely do that. I really think that if you believe in superhuman or super whatever intelligence, then I think that we need to ask ourselves, do we want to be governed by something that's owned by private enterprise? And I think that the answer is probably not. I think the answer is probably, and maybe, you know, individual countries or territories will want their own AI that they want to control. To me, that sounds absolutely reasonable. Just like, you know, in most countries, we think that we want to trust our government for, let's say, health. But this is another example. And so,
but we're back to that discussion.
Yeah.
More in the market or in the state, and
to me, I'm
philosophical issue.
Introduce a sense of urgency. I'm saying, hey, we could say, hey, you know, things take time. They will, you know, we should be trying to slow things down. And I'm, you know, from what I see, things are moving very, very fast. And now is the time to ask ourselves, to have the right level, sense of urgency, so that we ask the real questions. And to me, one of them is definitely, should we nationalize AI? You know,
I love that we naturally nearly reach this stage in the discussion about a question I really wanted you guys to talk about, because there's this thing of public perception and reality, right? And my question was, what's the biggest gap between public perception and reality in your area of work? But I feel like we reached now this level of, okay, is it national? Is it international? Is it global? But at the same time, I want to bring it back also to the room. We're a smaller group.
The spice must flow.
The spice must flow. A Dune reference for everybody who hasn't watched Dune yet. Maybe that's not a bad metaphor, actually. Like there's one thing that in Dune, right? There's one thing, spice, that drives the whole galaxy because you need it to get from point A to B. Is that AI now for us? And that's what I meant in the beginning with these, okay, there's the buzzword again, but here we talk about a real issue, right? And that's why also we shouldn't talk about 5-year span. It's about the next year and the year after. Yeah.
The question for me is within this is, if we see, I think that's the thing, if we see AI as software, large-scale software infrastructure, right? Because it's a kind of like comparable with large-scale cloud, like data storage infrastructure, right? Because that's what we have already, which uses pretty much the same model of like hey, let's take all our energy resources to run all these computers somewhere where nobody really asks why are they here, and to do all of, to produce these wonderful services. And you could, of course, also argue to use language like AI, what AI does, transformer like model based AI or prior or later. Aren't those just services? Even though like, yeah, no, these services can, at some point they see each other and they have like a secret handshake and suddenly there's the super intelligence. That's all a thing. And I'm all in favor of it, like somebody, and I mean, California tries to do it now, right? But at least like it's in the early stages. And I just discussed this with my students the other day about like regulating the foundation models at least, because those are the turbo capitalist models that want to reign it all, right? Like, and they play fine with the regulators because they just want to be, you know, like leave us alone, and all the grassroots models and all of this, these guys can do what they want. And at the same time in Africa, they are like software companies that work on AI models with a completely different mindset, because they just think differently about it, because they are not, I think, as extractive, because they cannot afford that. They want to build things that can solve their actual problems. And I mean, a lot of these problems are not so unsimilar here if you go a little more into rural, into the rural US. But when you look at like, the investments, who is investing? Only very few like investors from here investing in Africa and in these contexts. So I mean, in some ways, like we are already living, no matter if the AI is like becoming super intelligent or not, we are just by the fact of it being there and having all these promises for ideas that it puts into the head of people, it changes the global economy, right? Like, and that is like what's fascinating so much is everybody's a little bit like with climate change. Like, let's think about that tomorrow.
Funny thing is climate change.
Because today I just want to watch a video where RFK gets like completely blasted with like shitload of like a McDonald's fries, and that makes me feel so good, because that totally mirrors my feelings.
Alex, I mean, you're touching on a lot of topics actually. What I quickly take on, I'm trying to build a bridge also to Grant, because I cut him off.
Yes.
What I'm gonna take out from your statement right now is the meme culture and attention span, and how technology has brought us there, and how we literally cannot communicate with each other anymore beyond, I don't know, 30 seconds or something. In theory, right? This is the broad theory right now. We all know it. Right now, we have 2 mobile phones on the table. It's actually, I think, quite good. I really want to go back to airplane mode. Wonderful. 3. Grant, I know you're thinking a lot about, you know, social sensing and how to interact differently with each other. I would love to give you space a bit to talk about this and how maybe you react to what you've heard.
Sure, yeah. Can I address this one thing?
Of course.
Okay. I think there's this interesting question about nationalization as opposed to privatization, but maybe there's some kind of middle ground here where, you know, think about edge computing, where you can have more hyperlocal computing infrastructure, where you have, say, data trust. We can talk about Web3 technologies. So you have more of a municipalism here, where, you know, say, for example, it's not just one giant company who's training all these foundational models. Well, they might be, but then you can micro-instantiate these within local communities, for example. You can train digital selves and only allow those agents to travel within a municipality, as opposed to thinking about more grander kind of homogenizing kind of forces of algorithms at the more centralized level too. So I think there's something between, you know, the bigger scale and the you know, the small private scale. There's something maybe in between if we're talking about regulation and politics here. But regarding kind of social sensing, like what always gets me is I always think about this thought experiment where go back before everyone had access to the web, and actually even further back, where publicly distributed information, where you get this kind of globalized informational flow between people from across the world to people across the other side of the world. Well, before that, if you were in a physical location, think about where people's minds were at, and it was usually tied to a place. All right. People usually had some kind of really local newspaper or some kind of publication. And when you sat down in a place, the variance between where their minds are and where they physically are, there's a little bit of variance, but not too much. Now, fast forward a couple hundred years, and we have access to all of human knowledge on the web. Imagine, just look around here and at coworkers and people here. Think about where people's minds have gone on the internet today. Like, it's crazy just to think about all, like, the whole variance of what everybody is thinking about, and then think about how we're centrally located in this one space right here. To me, what really gets me is, how the heck do I understand where everyone's minds are at? How do we collaborate? How do we coordinate when the variance is so large between where we are in mental space, as opposed to when this was totally different, when we had hyperlocal kind of information flows? Because, I mean, what kind of blew my mind is, if you just kind of look at some of these diagrams about globalization and more interconnected societies over time, is just the rate at which we can send information to each other, and the cadence of that, and the diversity of information. There's a lot of complexity informationally, which to me translates to a lot of social complexity. And I think one of the biggest issues these days that's being talked about is this meta problem of, how do you coordinate in this really complex informational environment? And you see it in misinformation, disinformation, but you see it on a more intimate level here too, where we could be speaking the same language, but we aren't speaking the same mental language. We aren't speaking in the same concepts. That used to be the case, but now there's a lot more slippage here. So I don't know if I am answering anything, but I'm trying to offer a lot more problems that I think we should be attending to, because I think if we can't coordinate and collaborate, we're kind of
even here today, not to answer too many questions, more about, we need to talk about certain things specifically out of the tech sector, I think, because my experience also so far in networking events the last 2 years was always, you're not working in AI, so don't lecture me on, or don't tell me about, because you don't understand how an LLM works. Potentially not the nitty gritty, but I think all of us can actually relate to it, what it means if our day-to-day is obstructed or completely upended through an automation. That can be from automated cars and the driver or the taxi driver gets disrupted, or the knowledge worker nowadays, right? And going back to these clocks, it's a different speed here than it may be in Europe, but in the end, we are interconnected, and it shouldn't just be engineers talking about the pitfalls and the good things. It should be all of us. And I think this is why I want to bring everybody together. And you might have not answered a question you think, but maybe you have created new questions, right, with all of us that we can actually talk about after. Also, we're reaching very closely right now the end of this talk, and we knew already in the beginning, right, this is an hour, will never with 6 people be enough to deep dive, but I think there is a lot of topics that come up here, which I would love, first of all, to connect here with each other, but then also maybe in more one-to-ones dive deeper. And I think this is the value of what we create here today. Okay, that was a big a big wrap up here. Yeah, I would love to hear from the audience. I'm going here through the Slido and nobody has used it. Oh, no, too.
We've got an old-fashioned hand.
Yes, wonderful. Yes, then we need to bring a microphone to you. Oh, sure. It's for the Zoom people.
Hi, I hope the Zoom people can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you for the lovely discussion. Just to say, to introduce myself, I'm part of the European delegation. I'm representing a European SME, first time in the Silicon Valley, first time in San Francisco. So the hype is real. I'm just super hyped, but I was super happy to hear some forbidden words spoken out loud on this stage, like capitalism or technology for good and for humans, and some critical words being spoken out loud about how the discussion about AI is going on behind a closed door and it's not super inclusive. So I will bring that knowledge home and share it with my European friends. But I wanted to ask you one question. Are you familiar with the term of product market trap? It's by Professor Bursten at Stanford. It's this idea of certain products being so evil and dangerous that people would rather pay to get rid of them. For example, social media. It was actually a social experiment ran by Professor Bursten with people who were using social media and who were eager to pay actual money out of their pockets for social media to disappear among their peers and friends, because they feel that they are in a kind of a social trap. They cannot really get rid of social media. They have to stay there, but they would rather it didn't exist. So do you think it will happen with AI sometime in the future?
What do you mean by with AI? What
Maybe
do you imagine?
Is there a scenario in the future where people ask the same question? Would you rather AI didn't exist? Would say, yeah, I would pay $50 a month out of my pocket for it to disappear completely.
So I think if it takes on the same kind of application or problem structure. So I think I know the study that you're citing. So I think this was in the recent kind of rounds that Jonathan Haidt was making regarding, yeah. So to clarify for everyone here, this was a study run out of the University of Chicago. Several conditions were run with some younger folks, and in one condition, effectively what the study found was that some young folks would pay to give up social media, and they call this negative utility. The issue and the really the nuanced thing here is that it's a collective action problem. So the reason they stay on the platform is that you get the network effects of needing to know who the other people, your friends, are on the platform. So I think what I'm getting at is if AI is used to kind of continue to emphasize, say, these same kind of problem structures, collective action problems, where, say, on a network, you want to be around other people, then yes. And I can imagine a world where the algorithm becomes that much more better, so you get that much more social insight or perceived social utility out of whoever you're engaging with too. But just AI, I'm not sure as a technology. I think it's more about like what's happening in the user experience and what's the problem structure there.
I can add maybe, who's there first? Adding an observation there around the signal of like the younger generation using a lot of analog technology. Like you'll see CD players, and sort of the rationale might be that I don't want to be beholden to a recommendation algorithm. I want to have control. You see like tapes and CDs becoming like very popular. Yeah, or like disposable cameras. I mean, I saw that trend already once. Now I'm dating myself. But that I think is an interesting signal to pay attention to. But I see that if we magnify that at scale, I start to see a challenge, like one to Grant's point, like, yes, if your other friends are on the platform, even if you want to adopt this analog culture, that becomes a challenge. But I then also see this intersection, say, with class. Like I think right now, private schools like have like no phone policies, but other schools don't. So you might now have this differentiation of like analog spaces where people who can pay to offload AI like that. Yeah, so that is a potential future that plays out. This gets back to the forbidden words of capitalism and incentive structures. But I don't know, maybe there's some hope that there are those weak signals in this younger generation with the analog tech. I think I cut someone off, Vincent.
Yeah, now I realize that I wanted to answer a slightly different question, which is, I mean, to me, there is no amount of money that individual citizens could pay that would stop the development and growth of AI. So that I'm very convinced of that, but I do think that at the same time, I'm very intrigued with not the idea of stopping the growth of AI. And when I mean AI, I mean those, the frontier models. But I think that there may be an opportunity for us to really ask ourselves, is there an opportunity to nationalize AI?
If I may answer your question as well, I would say, first of all, I don't see a lot of difference between AI and social media because they are part of the same thing. But But okay, but the beauty with social media is that it's a technology which is more technology. Let's say it's an ecosystem which is more mature, so we can already judge a little bit better. And the point is, yes, I will pay all my money to get rid of it, frankly. But the point is, social media per se, if you think about it, is not a bad thing. If you go back to the origin, where Mark Zuckerberg was using it to connect to his to the people in the college, it's a fantastic in the campus. It's a fantastic thing. It became a very bad thing when money went into it, when advertisement algorithms and all that shit, frankly. So again, the point is, what type of capitalism do we want? Because if we are only driven by Wall Street, that's the end game. Whereas, okay.
I see the European vision takes over a little bit. There's some, yes, there's some, well, first of all, we reached the time limit, but there's some really great questions coming in. I would love to close with one of the audience questions. Whoever asked the question about digital twins could simulate billions of possible conversations, whoever was that wants to ask it, or should I just read it?
Anonymous.
Yes, we can also stay purposely anonymous. I really love it's fine. I really love the question as like a wrap up for today. Digital twins of all of us could simulate billions of possible conversations we might have, and then select the best, agree or disagree. So it's like the absolute end goal of automation, that even that what we have right now is kind of like simulated away from us. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, that all the possible discussions, conversations will be done by our own agents?
It's missing a soul. Now we're gonna get, spiritual.
That's nice.
How many people have seen that TV show Upload, where you upload your consciousness?
Mhm.
And I always think, yeah. And I say it's missing a soul. And I'm in tech and seeing that. So no, for me.
Good point.
I'm thinking about more so, I mean, that I see that as maybe that's a dystopian potential future. And I just saw this, I can't remember the name of the tool, but Ethan Mollick posted this, where it's like a Zoom call with three people, two of which are duplicates and one is an AI generated person. And the whole idea is, if you play that forward, it's like basically you send us to a Zoom call and we'll be at the bar down the street and our agents will hash it out. So I think that's a very negative and soulless a potential future, to Leslie's point. But then I'm also thinking about maybe what would be a pro-social example, and I think of MIT's Future Me research study that's on right now. And so the background for this is you can answer some questions about your current social relationships and goals, and then you'll have an AI assistant who's basically like 60-year-old Stef that I can have a dialogue, and thinking about like there's other past psychology research saying, like, if you look at different potential futures, it basically you become a little bit more kind of conservative with your choices, or almost like mitigating risk. And so I'm thinking about basically AI as this, like, you can run a bunch of different scenarios and how that will change behavior. Will we become maybe less risky, or is there also an element of our, like, yeah, like there's a sort of a comforting element talking to yourself in 60 years. And I think the hypothesis is that it'll like kind of reduce anxiety and existential dread. So I don't know, that's maybe a provocative potential positive. Yeah, Grant wants to.
Yes, and I think the key thing here is what happens when you automate out decisions. One of these things in design, what occurs is kind of diverge and create different concepts. And then down the road, you select one of those concepts. Well, we can think about conversation or think about engaging in life decisions in the same kind of way, I think. You can map it out kind of like a tree structure, see where we kind of think about different choices, different horizons of possibility, and then we start to hone in. That's every decision, every action we make in life. When you automate that process out, think about how you automate out how life changes you, how those decisions change how your neurons fire, how it changes how you behave and interact with other people going into the future too. So not only are you just cutting out you envisioning different futures, but you're also changing how the journey changed you as you went through life. I mean, think about going through life and automating all kind of the decision making away, and then ending up at the end with none of the wisdom of life, but somehow having lived it in some odd kind of way. So
I'll take it back. Mine is not a pro-social future. It's also dystopian, just a different flavor of dystopia.
My answer would be, I can think of plenty of human-to-human interactions that I'd like to get rid of. Like, I've been trying to schedule a doctor appointment for 2 weeks. I would rather not try and talk to the scheduler from Sutter, right? So I would gladly delegate these kind of human interactions so that actually I have more time for the human-to-human interactions that I care about. So I don't think it has to be
and that gets to a really interesting question where we have to be self-reflective and ask, what interactions do I want to have? And what interactions do I want to deprecate and leave out of the equation here? And that's, I think, one of these bigger questions that we aren't asking ourselves. What is enriching? What is not?
And as a wrap-up, Sebastiano, Alex, agree, disagree, indifferent.
We agree to disagree, or
The Zoom, our Zoom crowd.
We go. I think we aligned at the heart.
That's a nice
Yes.
wrap. We're aligned at the heart. I think that's also a nice starting point for connecting. Orestes, yeah. Please. But you will need a microphone.
take
include-
this, take
yeah.
this.
So I was listening and I was.
you have to turn it on.
Okay. No, I should do that, but I think you will like it because it's really relevant.
If you go here,
So,
the
No matter what we say, there was always an ancient Greek that said something really relevant to our discussion. So you will appreciate this. So listen, Aristotle, you know about one of the greatest democracies the humankind ever seen was the Athenian democracy. I think that where we all got the inspiration. But there were two fundamental problems. The women couldn't vote, and they had slaves. Of course, the Greeks questioned this, and though there was someone asking Aristotle, I mean, okay, why you have this in Athens? I mean, but this is a problem, right? Your society, it's divided. There are slaves, and Aristotle said, look, if we had in the future sometime automated machines to do the work that these people are doing for us, then we won't need them because we need to have the time, the citizens, the men, to think about their societies. So, and now what we're discussing is like, now we have the AI to do the thinking for us, and we will do, I think we will do the work. I think Aristotle put it, I think in my view, and this is the interesting part, how we should treat or think about the AI as a tool at the end, and not replace the thinking that we need to do in order to improve our society. That was wanted to say. So I hope you find it useful.
Thank you so much for this. And thanks for you guys to bear here for an hour and share your wonderful insights. And thanks for you guys to be here. We have, by the way, half an hour now until we have to leave. So whoever can stay and want to stay and connect, we have still drinks, we have some food, and goodbye at Zoom. There will be a recording, which I'm happy to share with everybody who's here on the email list. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you, Jan,
Jan.
for